Welcome to episode number 5 of the AVA Movement Podcast, a show about all things Angels and Airwaves, To the Stars, and Tom DeLonge. My name is Adam Barnard, and I am once again joined by Stephen Christie and J. Corey Fox to discuss brand new topic, the Best of AVA poll that we recently put out on Facebook and social media. Now that we're at the cusp of new music and a big comeback of the band, we thought it would be a great time, as AVA Movement to poll everyone involved in the community and see, what are your favorite albums, what are your top 3 favorite songs, and just get a gauge on how the legacy of Angels and Airwaves is sitting with the fans. So today, the poll is closed. We're going to sit down and review the results and discuss the results and kind of talk about the band's legacy up till now as we're coming into this new album. But in the meantime, Jay and Steven, welcome back. How are you guys?
Yeah, feeling good. Had a good New Year. Did you guys have a good New Year?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I did as well. I'm doing pretty good. And, I of course flew out to Toronto in January, right, for that AVA concert. Yeah, and Tom got sick, but, I'm going back in May. So.
That's great. So because they rescheduled all of them, I think, right? So
they did. I think there might have been a couple of U.S. cities that people were waiting for. I think they were fest shows, so it might have been harder for them to rebook that.
Right.
But other than that, the other dates are still. And I've got family out there, so luckily, I didn't spend too much money just on a trip out there, and I still went shopping and I still did stuff. So.
Well, anyways, to the Best of AVA poll, I'm just going to go ahead and read some of the statistics off of the poll. We had 2,439 participants, which is a big chunk of the social media collective we have on both Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. The number one album with 894 votes, or 36.7% of the votes, is We Don't Need to Whisper, the band's debut album. Just want to ask you guys, did you see this coming when the poll came out?
Yes.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. Although it is tight between that one and I Empire, even with the results, and that whole split doesn't surprise me whatsoever. And I actually thought it was going to be pretty close. It stole that by, just about 1%. So.
Yeah, I Empire's just 33 votes behind, which is not bad, all things considered, just 1 percentage point behind. I don't know. I guess we're going to get in a little bit later into what we wanted to vote for, but I think it's interesting that first record, which is kind of the genesis of the band and the band's message, is so enduring. One thing I've seen in the recent years, all over the place in terms of fan feedback, is like Dreamwalker. It's almost like that kind of ushered in a new section of fandom, or a bunch of people just started listening to Angels in the last 5 or 6 years, and the Dreamwalkers kind of like the latest from the band, and I think they connected with it. It reinvents the sound. It's a very diversified album. Like each song has a very different vibe to it. So I was kind of expecting the Dreamwalker to be a little bit higher up, but I guess if the legacy fan base came out, all the old school fans came out to the poll, it makes a lot of sense that We Don't Need to Whisper is way far ahead of the Dreamwalker and all the other records except for I Empire.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually quite an interesting take. But just going off that logic, I think with the people who come from the Dreamwalker album, you would think more would vote for it, but it's sitting pretty low, considering.
It's higher than Love Part 2, though.
I don't know why everyone hates Love Part 2. It's interesting. It's like I think Angels fans are very familiar with not necessarily the statistical breakdown of what fans feel, but the social media presence of what fans say, which is that it's something that's weird I've seen in the community happens since we were on the forum, and even have that now pervade the comment section in the Facebook group and everything. It's like Love Part 2 is terrible and redundant. Dreamwalker is, most of them are like, it's amazing, and then I Empire is often their favorite, and so it's like We Don't Need to Whisper sometimes doesn't get talked about as much, at least in this what I followed.
I've noticed that too. It doesn't get talked about in that way, like the same way as, like, let's say Love Part 1, but it's just sort of in the background always, I think, as like, it was the start to, AVA.
Just to talk about the Love Part 2, I think the main reason it gets kind of the hate that it gets, I don't think it's deserving hate, but the hate that it gets, just as someone who was around at the time on the forum, probably partook in quite a lot of it myself, which I shouldn't have. um, the band seemed stale at the time. It wasn't that the music. I don't think the music's bad. I think there's quite a lot of filler on Love Part 2. I think that's how it was designed, really. I think it was designed as filler.
It was supposed to be an EP.
Yeah.
Like there was supposed to be like 4 or 5 songs on it. It was supposed to be a supplementary EP to Love, the album. What is the first part now? And I think once they got in the studio, they were experimenting with a lot of score pieces. They had just scored or were in the process of scoring the Love movie that Will Eubank directed. So all of a sudden there are these fragments and ideas and riffs and pieces of music and themes. And I think it kind of just spiraled into a full length album. It's also important to remember that Tom was like busier than ever when he was making this album, which is maybe why I guess it wasn't as much time for it to evolve, and maybe there wasn't as much creative bandwidth to channel, because it's like he was touring big stadium tours with Blink, stateside and in Europe. He was making an album with Blink. That did not seem like a fun process or a very harmonious process looking back, so that probably took a toll. They were scoring the movie, they were editing the movie, working on distributing the movie, and then they were making another album, and they were touring with Angels. So it's like when you start to put that picture together, it makes sense why the record is the way it is and is very ambient. I think people didn't like how there wasn't as much traditional rock structure to the songs or as much drive. It was, sometimes it just felt like a score. I don't know. I mean, these are all just reflections and thoughts to kind of put that in context, because I've seen a lot of people be like, yeah, that's where the band started to lose me, was Love Part 2.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right on that. At that time on the forum, it was a very sort of, everyone was sort of bored with what was happening, which is hard to believe in this day and age, because now everyone's sort of like, really wants them to put out more, really wants the band to put out more. But at the time, it was sort of like, you should maybe take your time, just do Blink.
Yeah. It's weird because like when I came in to Angels and Airwaves fan community right as Love 2 was coming out. So really, Love Part 2 and the Neighborhoods album were the first 2 things I heard from Tom in full. Like, they weren't just singles on the radio. So for me, I was like, oh, Neighborhoods is so dope, and Love Part 2 is like the coolest. It's like, it's like a space movies score combined with punk rock. I'm like, how could you not like it? I just didn't get the context that, okay, we had already had like 3 albums of this or some variation of this. And it's like, I think for fans who were there since 2006 and didn't just hop on the boat in 2011, it was like, it was understandable for them to want, the band to move on, or want Tom to focus on Blink and see where that band could go in its evolution.
I remember at the time, I don't know, maybe it's because he sort of always did say there was going to be a series of things coming up that were going to be themed to this, to like Love Part 1. I had also saw them on tour on the 2010 tour.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I was obviously really excited. I still think the 2 as a whole with the movie, though, that whole Love era of AVA, it still seems to as a whole have some type of endearment amongst the fan community, though.
Yeah. In terms of legacy, I think so. And that's probably why it's not at, 0.2%, which some of the EPs are at, which don't quite have the same legacy.
Right.
So just taking a second now to look over, just to review the album ranking from the AVA fan poll. Best album, as we said, We Don't Need a Whisper, with 37% of the vote rounded up. Second album, I Empire, 35%. Third album, Love Part 1, 11%. Number 4, Dreamwalker, 10% rounded up. Number 5, Love Part 2, 6%. Number 6, Chasing Shadows EP at 1.5%. Number 7, Of Nightmares at 0.2%. And then all the way sitting sadly at the bottom with 2 votes, all alone, is Stomping the Phantom Brake Pedal,
right,
with 1.1% of the vote. I hate that that's at the bottom.
You mean to tell me that is not a fan favorite EP?
I mean, people talk about it pretty fondly, or they don't. Okay, they talk about Diary pretty fondly, and maybe some of the score pieces. They don't seem to like the remixes. That's something I still see to this day. Is like, God, I hated those remixes, even if they like Dreamwalker or whatever else the Rubens have done.
Yeah, the remixes were a bit they were just a bit random, weren't they? It was a bit, I don't know.
Jay, what did you think?
I like a few of them. I think it takes time to grow on you. Like it's not like I feel like at the time it was released, like, you know, that's not what people expected. I don't think like they really wanted it, but I mean, I'll be careful with that because in all reality, let's not forget this was a project in tribute to Critter,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, maybe it's less known, but looking at it from that angle, like it's something that, like, you know, he had to do.
I mean, I like the Saturday Love and Surrender ones as well, just because of how dirty and industrialized they sound. Kind of a bit, I feel like Nine Inch Nails had a bit of influence on Alon Rubin, or at least he brought some of those technical skills to the remix album. Yeah, it's a detail that can get lost in the mix of the legacy of the band, but that record, or that double EP, the Score Evolved and then the remixes, were basically what Aaron suggested Alon did just to put his basically what Aaron suggested Alon should do to put his stamp on the band and contribute kind of, I think, what Tom was looking for, which was innovation, you know, a complete left turn from the very hi-fi space rock sound of the band. I think a lot of people at the time were also scared that's what things would sound like going forward consistently, which is why it was rejected at first. It's like, like, you know, we wanted different, but we didn't want this different. I think now it sits in context much better, understanding that it was only really meant to be a appetizer to the Dreamwalker in terms of saying, like, we can do anything now. Like, we've done 4 albums of really cool, you know, space rock or progressive rock or whatever, and they all kind of say different things, but they share a similar sonic set. And then this is like, okay, you know, let's tear up the rule book and then we can revisit our punk roots or our space rock roots, but we're going to always, you know, with each EP or album, we're going to try something different. And so that's why I like this EP so much. And I think it's important. It's like a turning point for the band, but, you know, in the context of a poll, for the best album, fans were only allowed to pick one album. See, for the songs, you were able to pick your top 3, and so everyone's, you know, putting their top 3, so there's gonna be a lot of overlap. So songs that are people's third favorite can still rank high on the list if enough people vote for them. With this, it's like, I don't think, you know, all but 2 fans, which maybe I was one of them and I forgot I voted for this album, all but 2 fans were like, this is just not the most important one. Like, if you only pick one project, it probably has to be something like I Empire or We Don't Need to Whisper.
I mean, when you think of Angels in the Airwaves, that's what most people think of. They think of the beginning and the album that led up from the beginning. The first album always sticks with you, and the follow-up to that album, it needs to be good. And they far succeeded that, and that's why I think that sits at second place.
Wow, you never forget your first, right?
You don't. All right.
It's true. Like, We Don't Need to Whisper for me over the years, certainly now after sort of the legacy stuff has passed and we've gone to some pretty more popular EPs, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well.
Yeah.
Giving it, again, like we're talking a lot about context, just organically, because I think, you know, people who have been following this band for a really, really long time, who've been following the artwork for a long time, to whether it's To the Stars or whatever, is We Don't Need to Whisper sort of reflects everything backwards differently. If you listen to it, it still lives up to, even though Tom himself might not have known what kinds of songs he was going to write, you know, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years later, or what exactly he would have been working on. It still puts everything, the whole discography and everything else, I think, into a nice context. And it's actually really interesting how I think, like, We Don't Need to Whisper is like this malleable piece of art, which is what Tom intended. Maybe not all of Angels and Airwaves, but at least, okay, if he's going to do it, if he's, like, say he had one shot at it, you know, like, this is going to be the one that will be, you know, this moving piece of art that sets the context for a lot of other things that the band does. That's how I feel about it, especially recently. And it's actually really interesting to listen to.
Yeah. I think it was meant to redefine him and meant to, like, him trying to burst out of I don't want to say a confine, but a mold at least, that it's like you're the punk rock guy, you play fast, you play your guitar and you're funny and you talk about fucking dogs or whatever, and it's really funny, and it's like no, it's like I have so much going on inside me emotionally, and like I'm going to do everything I can to put it in this album. And I think I've listened to the album again recently, and sometimes it's like some of the songs really, I think it could be argued, just take it too far. It's kind of like unrestrained, but it's kind of also cool because it's unrestrained. It's not the most manicured piece. It's angry, it's intense, it's earnest. Yeah, and it's, it has intense sentimental value, I think, to the author, which was what resonates with people, I believe.
Yeah, actually, there's something really interesting about that album. Recently I got the opportunity to listen to the stems of The Adventure.
Yeah, for the Nail the Mix
from
thing,
Nail the
right?
Mix, yeah. And if you just solo Tom's vocals, you can hear there's almost like a desperation in his voice, and he's not lost that punk edge. You think when you listen to the album that he's perhaps putting on a voice or trying to make his voice sound a bit smoother, but if you hear the raw vocals, that's what they are. They're raw vocals. They're, he's really going for all the notes. He's shouting pretty much the entire song.
Yeah.
he hasn't lost that punk rock sensibility inside him. So yeah, I think it is an important album. It's growth. That's what it is. It's him growing up but not losing his identity.
So with that in mind, let's go ahead and move on to what the three of us picked for best album. Steven, why don't you go first? What did you pick for your favorite album?
So I picked I Empire. To me, it's an important album. It's the first Angels and Airwaves album I heard personally. That's the main reason I picked it. But I just think sonically, it's so much better. There's so much more going on. It's so much more thought out. They're not really thinking with anger anymore. They're really calm, collected.
Yeah.
And they've really focused in on the sound, and that to me is what makes I Empire like their best album. I think they've took everything they've learned from the first album, and they've took their sound that obviously did them wonders to even go on to a second album. Did them wonders. They toured it. It's worked out. They've refined it. They haven't made it quite as big as the first album. I feel like they still had that punk rock in the first album. They've kind of toned it down a little bit, and like I said, they just refined it. To me, it's the best album.
They kind of, I think on the first album, they just had this desire in the performance, in the engineering, and the mixing to just bring depth and punch and roar and kind of, it's kind of like you're talking about the vocals, just rawness. But there's also kind of like a hi-fi, 80s radio hit sensibility to the way that album was mixed, and that kind of created a cool contrast. But with I Empire, it's just like total hi-fi, sparkly, everything's perfectly manicured. There's a lot less rawness, and to be fair, some people don't like that, which is fine. To me, I think it added just a tremendous shine to the message. Like it elevated what they were trying to do, because it's like it felt like on a technical level they absolutely nailed it and knew what they were doing, and there was no, like you said, there was no seeking to like find yourself. It was like, we know who we are now, let's like bare our soul and show you how optimistic we are and how much we want to spread a feeling of love and empowerment. And so I also put I Empire as my favorite, and that's why.
I agree with both of you because I also picked that album.
Oh, really?
So
great discussion, guys.
Right, that's it. We can end it there. Vibes accomplished. That's it. Yeah.
See you on episode 6. Yeah.
But no, I'm just kidding. That was like that whole we're gonna walk out and play another song thing 2 minutes later. So I agree. What I was thinking when you were just saying all that stuff there, Adam, was that it is, I think, musically, and as well you could say lyrically, although I think we try not to talk about lyrics too much. I think we all come from the same place because we know that's a very more sort of personal thing for the artist, or more
Sure.
bendable, it's malleable, it's relatable on different levels to different people. But musically and identity wise of Angels and Airwaves at the time, I think it's more focused, but it's just an interesting dynamic between the two. I think they go together like quite well as like top picks.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Didn't Tom say that he wanted the two albums to tell a complete story or be paired together? Because, The End of Heaven has the opening of Valkyrie Missile in it. It's kind of supposed to be, two sides of the same coin, two chapters in the same book, and be like, the first era of Angels. Wasn't that how it was intended?
I think at the time, considering it's only the second album, I do remember him saying, like, with Love, I would say it takes a turn from there just to a little bit of a different, there's the word again, vibe and whatever. Yeah. Almost like darker when you think of it, even though Love isn't necessarily dark by any means. Like on its own, but in contrast to the two, I don't know if like you can sort of see that. I Empire I felt was also very artistic, but like you said, more in a well-rounded way.
Yeah.
I think there was still, like, I always talk about the build up to that album. When they were teasing on their website, they used more specific imagery, I feel like, and then in that thought of them sort of going together and it being sort of one thing, I think of like the music videos and short films or unofficial short films from both.
So
like,
cool.
I know at the time, like, after We Don't Need to Whisper came out and Tom was doing more stuff, I also have sort of a personal sentimental value with I Empire also as well. I remember I got my first pair of Macbeth shoes around that time. I love the album artwork too.
Yeah. Oh, Drew Struzan.
Which is done by that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Drew Struzan who did the original Star Wars trilogy or Indiana Jones and plenty of stuff since then. It kind of like, he has a signature style, just in the film communities. I know it's like people are like, oh yeah, I want that poster to have like a bit of Struzan in it, or it's like this needs to feel like Drew Struzan did it. He's like such a household name as a designer, and the fact that he did an Angels and Airwaves album is still to this day one of the coolest things. And like, I'm kind of with you. I think the album cover itself like just elevates the whole record, or probably adds like half a point to my ranking just because it's so goddamn cool.
Probably a lot of people, and they might not even realize that, a lot of people, as to why they might have picked that. It could be a subconscious thing. I don't know.
I remember I listened to I Empire in high school. It was, I guess, my like junior, senior year, and it was recently after I discovered Tom's music and the Love double album and Neighborhoods and the movie. I just thought it was so cool that he was doing punk rock and also movies and, just a complete raw exploration of consciousness and emotion. And so I picked up the record and I was just listening to it constantly, going to and from school, and just wherever I went, I would put the record on. And it was like such a burst of joy, just a constant IV drip of pure elation. And it was like, the record's not perfect. I think there's a lot of redundancy on the record musically. Like, the same guitar riffs are used very often or with minimal permutations, but for whatever reason, I don't know how it works. Like, the redundancy of the record works to make it more cohesive or coherent. The record itself just flows like butter, and it has it's both very diverse and very uniform at the same time, more so than any other record, more so even than the Love records, which I think were trying to flow into each other, but it didn't quite work as well as it did on I Empire.
If I am correct, I feel like I remember the initial teaser trailers for the Love movie or whatever. Not that I don't think many of the clips actually made it into the film itself, but it was around the time of I Empire that Tom started to allude to that there might be some type of short film or feature film, if I'm right on that.
Yeah, no, I think Love was supposed to be the I Empire movie. Mm-hmm. It just took so goddamn long to make, and it was supposed to be vignettes, and then it was supposed to be an extended short film, and then it was kind of, they shot a ton of more stuff to make it a feature, and it was like this organic thing that developed over like 5 years, but it started, early I Empire era. So now let's go ahead and move on to the song part of the poll, where we asked fans to pick their 3 favorite Angels and Airwaves songs, and I think we offered pretty much everything except the acoustic EP and the songs in the acoustic EP. So everything from Valkyrie Missile all the way up to Kiss and Tell. And not to sound like a clickbait article, but the results may shock you. I was not expecting some of just from the top three. It actually caught me off guard. So just throw it over to you guys. What did you think of the top three, which for the record were The Adventure, Heaven, and then Kiss and Tell?
Kiss and Tell being on the top three out of all the songs that were offered, and even all the songs that got pretty high that maybe would have ranked fourth or fifth or sixth or something like that.
Yeah.
Was not expecting that to really make it on a top three.
That's exactly what I was talking about too. I did not see that coming. I remember my friend texted me when Kiss and Tell came out, and they were like, do you see everyone saying this is one of the best songs Tom has ever written? Like, come on, guys. Like, let's be real. And I think both of us kind of were like, yeah, I think it's just the hype. And now it doesn't feel like the hype because this poll came out, 6-7 months after the song came out. I mean, it is the most recent release, but I think, when Rebel Girl came out, everyone liked it, but it wasn't best song Tom has ever written. For whatever reason, Kiss and Tell has really touched on something profound with, at the very least, the Angels and Airwaves fan body, because to have it third on the list of all these incredible songs is saying something.
It does say a lot. It does say a lot that even after all this time, after all of these albums, he's able to release a song and it's able to stick with people who might not have even been listening for all this time and suddenly have got back into the band and they've went, oh yeah, that's the third best song he's ever wrote. It's for me, it's like Jay said, it's surprising. There is a lot of songs he's wrote with this band that I personally would consider to be at least musically and lyrically more cohesive and better. The Adventure I can understand. That's the big one, and it's kind of expected.
Right.
It's a brilliant song.
So here's the thing about Kiss and Tell. For me to do anything less than heap praise on this song would be hypocritical, because I have played this song several times a day, every goddamn day since it came out. So that said, it might sound weird.
I do too. I listen to it on the bus on the way to work, not gonna lie.
And it is, I think it almost captures the rawness of We Don't Need to Whisper. And I don't mean the sonics, I don't mean the message, I just mean the blend between very, very polished musicianship and technical skill, and then raw emotion and authenticity, and punk, for lack of a better term. The song feels like a boxcar racer song in terms of structure. It has some weird breakdowns, it has some weird tonal shifts, it has some cool riffs and, dynamic volume changes and everything. And so it's very, very cool. I did not vote for Kiss and Tell, so it's hard for me to put it up in the top three, but I gotta say, I think the song is, we've discussed this in podcasts before, a very personal song to Tom, probably more than we know. It just feels like is bearing his soul, like We Don't Need to Whisper did. And I think, again, 20 minutes earlier, we were talking about why We Don't Need to Whisper resonated and what blend of emotion, makes it so ubiquitous or makes it such a favorite among AVA fans. I would, humbly submit the same thing is the case for Kiss and Tell, and that's why it made it so high.
I'm still surprised that it took just third place over less, I guess, more traditional song. Maybe something like Anxiety or The Gift, which I'm sad is not higher. I voted for, it was one of the songs I voted for,
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about some of the runner-ups or some of the other songs that got a big chunk of the vote but didn't quite make it to the top three. As far as I can see here, looking at the graph, after Kiss and Tell, the next highest song is Secret Crowds with 19.8%, which also feels like a fan favorite. After Secret Crowds, you have Everything's Magic at 17.4%, The War at 16.7%, Call to Arms at 16%. Rebel Girl is at 14%, and that's probably I think is top 10. So that's another surprise that a new song kind of didn't just fall off the grid, because if you look at some of the stuff from the EPs, I mean, like Artillery or View from Below or Home is a great song, but it got 0.6% of the vote. So it's like some of these, even the recent songs have gotten forgotten, but not the last two singles.
You know what? I think the EPs they came across as a bit of a weird time, and I think maybe it has a bit of a stigma to it now.
Yeah.
Where people they remember that time as the time that Tom was busy writing books, busy not being with Blink, busy not being with Angels and Airwaves, and it's hard not to think about. At least for me, it's hard not to think about that. So as soon as he comes back and he starts his focus on Angels and Airwaves, and the songs have a bit more of a structure and they have a bit more of a meaning behind them. Even Rebel Girl and like we were saying earlier with Kiss and Tell, it's easy to get attached to that sort of thing because it's like a new lease of life, especially for the fans.
Yeah.
It's something to hold on to that you haven't had for such a long time, you know?
There's definitely a polish or a finality or fully realized complexity to the last two singles than there are to some of the EP songs. Not that the EP songs are bad. Voyager is nearly on my top 3. I think it's one of the coolest songs Tom has ever done. I love the Of Nightmares EP, and as we said before, I love the Score Evolved and Remix EPs. But I do think, quite frankly, people equate that era with Tom posting selfies of himself in UFO documents in his office, and they're like, what exactly is this leading toward? Now, we know where it was going, and I think we all appreciate it a little bit more, but the result is like the EPs are kind of linked to those weird experimental times, those cross-platformal projects that were just in books and merch packs and stuff that people didn't dig as much. And I think that's a tragedy because I think there's actually a lot of his soul is in those EPs too. I don't know how you guys feel about that, or what do you guys think of some of the other results that we got?
Yeah, like I'm actually surprised. Like I've noticed also just in comments and stuff like that as well, that some of the songs that used to be, I mean, we have more music to pick from, but that considering the fact that, not a lot of people really hype up the EPs. I personally love Chasing Shadows, like you said, at least Voyager and Chasing Shadows, the song. Those are great songs. Overload as well. I feel like that's obviously the most popular EP, I think, because it actually shows up in the pie charts, and I think it's well talked about and it's generally well liked. But songs like Anxiety, I've noticed, lost a little bit of popularity over the last few years. Hallucinations losing a bit of Secret Crowds losing a bit of hype as well.
Well, actually, what's even more surprising is Call to Arms has got less votes than Everything's Magic, but I seem to remember at the time everyone really wanted Call to Arms to be the main single of I, Empire.
I didn't know Call to Arms was ostensibly more popular than Everything's Magic. I always thought it was the other way around.
I think that maybe people thought it was going to be a single because the intro to Call to Arms, I'm pretty sure they used it in the promotional stuff on the website.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Another interesting thing I noticed about this poll is how there's a lot of songs that are sitting somewhere between like 8 and 12%. And
the
it's
gift
like,
is in that batch.
Yeah, there's this like Goldilocks zone where it's like not super popular, not unpopular. It's like just right, just enough that like everyone can appreciate it. You have A Little's Enough, The Gift, like you said. Look at
Wolfpack is in there.
Yeah,
that doesn't surprise
Wolfpack
me.
and Tunnels, both of them were really high. Both of them had almost 10%. Anxiety, Surrender, Saturday Love, Flight of the Apollo is another one. I never knew that was actually, that and Young London were up there. So that's, there's a lot of songs that I feel like maybe people made people's second or third choice or whatever that were similar enough to give it a bump on the chart right here.
I'm kind of surprised about Flight of the Apollo and Young London. I personally kind of ones that I've sort of glossed over myself. They're great songs, but there's a lot of bigger songs on that album that I thought maybe would have been more popular.
Yeah, when going into this poll, I really, I have my results here, or my favorite songs here, and we're all going to share in a second. But I think my rubric was a matter of whether the song reached its full potential. Like what songs, for what they were trying to be, were most fully realized. And I think people voting in this poll will all vote a little bit differently. Some will vote more what they feel is like empirically true, what is like justifiably the best. Some will just entirely vote based upon sentimentality. And I think all that's fine, by the way. I'm not at all criticizing how you vote. Vote however the hell you like. I just think for me, I guess the way I judge some of the things I picked was like, does this song accomplish what the song set out to do in the greatest possible way? Is it the most fully realized version of itself? And I think, Tom's a diverse artist, so he tries a lot of different vibes. He tries a lot of different styles and subgenres and messages and tonalities. And so it's like some things like The Gift I love. I love The Gift emotionally, sentimentally. I don't think it's the best song, and I don't think it does. I think it could be a lot better in the way it was produced. So for me, it's like I just don't vote for some of these songs in the mid-range, which a lot of other people voted for, which I respect though, because I think there is a sentimental value to a lot of these songs.
Yes, and I definitely think people would have voted, obviously, too, on personal favorites for whatever reason, and obviously that's totally okay. I feel like Of Nightmares often falls into that category because I see a lot of comments that are like, I absolutely love the Of Nightmares EP, or there's a song off it that they really, really like. That could just be, it's sort of like a weird, I think, just a taste thing for music. Maybe those other people listen to music in a genre that sounds more like that's like less like the rest of AVA, for example.
Sure.
I know The Gift is on my list.
Oh, shit.
No, that's okay. I can see where you're coming from again. Like we were talking about We Don't Need to Whisper as an album, not necessarily being the most refined. Could you imagine, I know this might be a little off topic, but could you imagine if Tom DeLonge made The Gift, like he did that song like nowadays, like if he did it, like if it didn't come out back then and it came out on a different album or came out later on, I wonder if that would be any different.
I think he's evolved a lot, whether it's with his collaborators or whether it's, in relation to whatever the album is. Like, I think, Aaron Rubin has talked about this and Tom has talked about this a bit as well, that like each album is kind of like a snapshot of where the band is at. And like, what are we doing now? What do I feel now? What do I have to say now? What am I listening to now? What old tricks do I want to, throw in the garbage? What new skill set? What new synth pads? What new riffs do I want to try out? So, it's like, I don't think it's something intentional that he would be like, oh, if I record The Gift now, I'm going to make it different. It's like if he had that idea for the song now or wanted to do that kind of song now, it would just inherently be different, not by design, but just by the fact that he's 10 years older and a different person. So that's where it's like, I think hard to, engage in that hypothetical scenario. However, if The Gift hypothetically did come out as itself, sounding the same, composed the same, performed the same, like right after Kiss and Tell, that would be interesting to see how people would respond to that.
It definitely is. Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a different sound. Yeah, Everything's Magic is definitely on my list as well. It's not like in the top, like absolute top, but like maybe fourth or fifth. I feel like you were talking about songs that reach like their full potential. I think like in the background, I think of that same sort of thing as well when I'm choosing. Everything's Magic does, I feel like it's just a really well composed song. And like, yes, let's not lie to ourselves. Like we were talking about, it's the single, it's the radio friendly song.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be any more than what it is, and it doesn't need to be any less. That's how I feel about it.
So then what are your top three, if you've ranked them as 1, 2, 3 in order?
In order, I would say, yeah, number one would have been Everything's Magic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and 2, The Gift. 3, The Adventure.
Interesting. Wow, I like that list a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that sarcastically. I really do.
No, I know.
Because it's like, I think all three songs fit.
Wow.
All three songs share a vibe.
It's really hard for me to like, sometimes I really want to like toss Overload or something from Chasing Shadows on there just because I like that EP as a project, but like individual song music wise, they're really powerful, and I know like you really like Voyager. It's like on one of your lists as well. But it's not as different compared to like some of the other things AVA has done, like, but maybe that's also why I sort of like them too. I always do enjoy a good, sort of classic AVA song vibe at least once. And I think Tom knows that about a lot of the fans too.
So, Steven, what are your top 3?
I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball here. I'm going to go with songs that I'm not choosing these songs on the purpose of the fact that nobody voted for them. I'm choosing them on the fact that musically, I'd say musically more than lyrically, they speak like a certain language. And I know that sounds like super, super cheesy, but my number 1 song is Kiss with a Spell.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I hear a lot of people shit on this song.
It's not a bad song. It's not a
And
bad
that's
song.
okay.
It's just like, I don't really, like, to me, it's again one of those filler songs on the Dreamwalker as a whole. That's just to me, though.
Stephen, this is really interesting because I know you yourself have shit on the Dreamwalker as a whole. So I find it very interesting. I find it not this. I sound so much more sarcastic than I'm
don't
intending
say that.
to be. You've said it on record. It's on past podcasts. But no, it's just interesting. I mean, I just want to ask you, as someone who has mixed feelings about the Dreamwalker, what makes Kiss with a Spell the number 1?
So when you hear Kiss with a Spell, this is my train of thought. The instrumentation behind it, all the syncopated beats, the sort of subby bass, the atmospheric, almost kind of like chilling keyboards and synthesizers.
Yeah.
There is guitars in there as well. You might not hear them, but there is guitars, and they're just doing like little subtle things, and that's what's great about that song. They're doing such subtle things that are just changing sounds here and there that are playing all the way through, but they're like blending them with other sounds, and it's making them sound a little bit off or a little bit eerie or kind of chilling, like I said. But that blended with the mix, I can't recall who did the mix. Was it Aaron that did the mix?
It was Aaron. Yeah.
The mix is absolutely phenomenal. There's not one thing out of place. The vocals sit perfectly just on top of all the instrumentation, not like a karaoke track where it's like, the vocals are like totally boosted all the way up and you're
For sure. Like a pop mix or whatever.
Yeah. He's found the place where the vocals are not just vocals, they're like an instrument to the song. That to me, when I heard it for the first time, that's the first thing that popped out to me. Just like everything. It was kind of overwhelming for me to listen to because there's so much going on. And I really, really urge anyone who has listened to it once and just totally threw it away to I sound like I'm selling something here, but just give it a chance. So number 2 is Do It For Me Now, an often overlooked single from the first album. A lot of people forget that there's a music video for this song.
There is.
Right? See, there you go.
I don't know how I could forget something like that, Adam. I think we talked about this a while back.
The music video.
Do It For Me Now video, yeah.
Isn't that where they like ascend?
Yeah, right. So the
Yeah.
music video sucks. The music video sucks.
Really?
Oh,
you guys don't like it?
Well,
See,
It's
here's
just-
why I like it. Here's why I like.
No, it doesn't suck.
It sucks.
It doesn't suck.
It's good because it sucks. It's good because it's
Yes.
like so melodramatic and kitschy and just like raw id, and like the wind machines blowing. It almost looks like, in like All the Small Things video where like Tom is like has the toilet paper and he's getting like blown around in the wind and he's like making a joke out of it. It's almost like
now
this.
he's living that.
Yeah, it's almost like the serious version of what they spoofed, but it's done with such intense earnesty and such like focus on a tone and a mood. And I'm not going to use the other word this time, but a feeling. And it's like to be able to do that, it is, just to go all in and not hold back. It's like I cannot possibly call it a bad video because it's just so brazen in what it wants to be.
Yeah, I agree. He definitely wasn't afraid, I think, just to be like, I'm going to make a music video that I'm going to try and make look like a Stanley Kubrick film.
Right. Exactly.
With the spacesuit and all that.
So cool. I know. So what's your third, Steven?
My third song is Teenagers and Rituals.
Oh, two Dreamwalker songs.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Bro, wow. I like it.
Bro. Yeah. Teenagers and Rituals, I feel, is the best album opener they have ever written. Simply because of the piano at the beginning. It sends shivers up your spines if you like blast that piano, man.
Yeah.
And then the drums come in, those pounding drums, and everything just starts like gaining, and bass comes in. It's great, man. It's a phenomenal song.
I really do enjoy it as an album opener as well, and I've always liked that piano too. Definitely, again, like we were talking about last time, Alon bringing what he had to AVA.
Yeah.
Yeah, the piano. Oh, I just those notes. It's like all the chords combined together. They just make this grand sound, and I think that's just a LAN in a nutshell.
It's the mixture of like the vibe you get when you hear an air raid siren, which is why they kind of put like a little like, if it sounds like emergency beacon in there, and then a punk rock song. It's literally like, grab onto the nearest solid object because we are about to, there is an earthquake that's about to come, and it's like a fight or flight response. Like the whole song just feels like a fight or flight response, which I think lends itself to some very enjoyable listens depending on one's mood.
So that was my top three. Adam, what's your top three?
Okay, so sitting proudly at number 1 is Diary, or Real One, depending on what you want to call it. And that's from the Score Evolved EP. I think this is a masterpiece, and I think it's like pretty much the perfect version of itself. From the the composition to the mix to just the vocals to any instrument that was chosen with taste and care and deliberation. And I think the song mixes Ilan's technical proficiency with the raw emotion of the love score cues and Tom's vocals and just the message of the band and the kinds of genres and influences it pulls from blew my mind when it came out. And I also put it number 1 because I think it's like one of the most ambitious songs, and it's also one of the most fully realized songs. Like the band or Ilan or whoever you want to say did this just did the absolute best job they could to make the song a reality. And it's like it probably will stay at number 1 forever for me. I don't know, it's gonna be hard to top.
And the only song with Angels in the Airwaves song anyway with bagpipes in it.
I know, it's so crazy, dude. This song is manic. Yeah.
That is crazy.
It's so good. And speaking of manic songs, my number 2 is Call to Arms, which was my anthem for a long time. I mean, this is probably the most emotional pick on my list in the sense that this song kept me going. It felt like it kept me alive in the height of my teenage angst, and it was just so unabashedly positive and inspiring, and so over the top in its just inspirational sound. It's just, yeah, there's nothing like going for a great run and listening to this song, or being in love with someone and listening to this song or whatever. It's just like it captures, I think, the band's ability to make you feel something just very profoundly.
Yeah, and as we were talking about album intros there, that's another fantastic album intro.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I would say Teenagers and Rituals and Call to Arms are the 2 best, so I do agree with you there.
Yeah.
So for my last one, I chose Hallucinations, which I nearly didn't put it on this list, but to me, I think it's probably one of the most fully, again, it's like, I think it's one of the best versions of itself. Like there are some other songs I listen to and it feels like, oh, there was more there. And with Hallucinations, it's like they put it all on the table. Like everything in that song is just everyone firing on all cylinders. They knew what the song wanted to be. They did some really cool stuff with the guitars. Like all the guitars are kind of clean. They're not heavily distorted.
Yeah.
But then that creates so much more room for the other instruments, the drums, the percussion, the synths, all sorts of little trinkets and percussion instruments they put in there. They have a pair of scissors in the intro. It's again, the raw innovation of We Don't Need to Whisper with the kind of inspirational, crisp Love sound, but also unlike any other track on the Love albums, I think. And it's kind of a single, but it's also kind of not. And it rides this really, really, really interesting zone and does almost everything at once. And I think it's very commendable for how much it attempts and then how much it pulls off. And then I guess the honorable mention would be the Mark Hoppus remix of Hallucinations, which if none of you...
My favorite version.
If you guys haven't heard the Mark Hoppus remix of Hallucinations, go ahead and look it up on YouTube and, have some fun. So I guess that just about wraps it up for our segment, our thorough segment on the top Angels and Airwaves albums and the top songs. Really cool to get a chance to celebrate the legacy of the band with you guys. Usually we have very specific discussions on here about a music video or a single or something along those lines. Now it's like a bit of a mountain to climb because there is just so much shit to talk about and so much stuff I think we as AVA fans get excited about. It's hard to narrow in, but I think we did the best job we could. So now that we've shared our thoughts on the Best of AVA poll that the AVA movement conducted just last month, we're going to go ahead and throw it over to you guys. We got a lot of voicemails for this month's episode. So here are the voicemails for this month's episode on the Best of AVA poll.
Hi, my name is Jake, and I think it's very fitting that both The Adventure and Heaven were voted among the top songs in the band's entire discography, not only because they represent the band's sound so well, both just feel like you're floating, and the production is just absolutely gorgeous, but I think it's the link that they both share within their lyrical content of hope. I think hope is an underlying theme for a lot of Angels and Airwaves music, the idea of being able to carry on, no matter the obstacles in your path. In Heaven, Tom talks about, if you see the light break through the clouds and fire up the distant town, and the world will begin. Exactly how it ends, and then it moves on to, please stay, don't go, I've got you now, are you curious, please stay. And then, obviously, as we all know, in The Adventure, ending with, and here we go, life's waiting to begin. And I think that specific lyrical content is what binds so many fans to Angels and Airwaves music, and especially after seeing their live show, it's special. And I think fans just connect with the band so sincerely because their music is able to get them through hardships and difficult spots in their life, when nothing else may be working. And I think that's pretty cool.
If I had to choose one album, I would choose the Dreamwalker demos. There's so much good shit in there. You get to really see where the artist fleshed out the ideas for the songs on the final product. Starting with the Wolfpack demo, number 1. It sampled a freaking awesome song. Chorus was awesome. Recover, that song was freaking awesome. I'd love to see that one fleshed out. And if I could be buried to a single song, I'd have to choose the Mercenaries demo off that album, because it's just, the hook on that is fucking sick.
Hey guys, my name is Sebastian. I'm from Costa Rica, and I actually flew back in October to LA to see Angels and Airwaves performing live, and it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. It was completely amazing. And regarding the selection of We Don't Need to Whisper as the greatest album of the band, at least for now, I couldn't agree more with that. I think that back at that time, there were a lot of expectations and uncertainty about what was going to be Tom DeLonge's new band and what was it going to sound. And I believe it showed us like a new vibe, a new musical vibe from Tom that didn't exactly fit what Blink-182 was at that time, but it was a great feeling and a great refreshing sound. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that selection. Keep up the good job, guys. You have a pretty decent fan base here in Central America and in South America. Bye.
Hey guys, this is Donnie from New York, and although I cannot disagree with the Facebook poll saying that The Adventure is the number 1 song, for me personally, Lifeline is definitely number 1, and then next to that would be A Little's Enough, and even Tunnels. And I think it's because it really touches on Tom's religious side, and although he's not as open about it and talkative about it, and I would probably say none of us know exactly where he stands on it, he obviously thinks about it. And from his thinking about it, and even from listening to his music, I know it sounds strange to say, but Angels and Airwaves music actually led me into believing in God, led me into having faith, and led me into that personal relationship with who I believe God is. And I'm just so thankful for Tom and his transparency and the music he writes and the questions he asks that were just an encouragement for me to open up my heart and start asking bigger questions. Thank you guys so much for what you do. I appreciate it. I can't wait for the next podcast. And yeah, without a doubt, Lifeline. I know you said favorite. Sorry, I gave you 3, but we'll just leave it at Lifeline. All right, guys. Can't wait to hear from you. Later.
Hey, guys. So no surprises with We Don't Need to Whisper and The Adventure being the number 1 hits. When you talk to most Angels and Airwaves fans, they will give credit to the original album and the original hit that will and always be their best song. Just have the most nostalgic feel to it and the most iconic Angels and Airwaves sound. As far as what I chose, I personally believe that Love is the best work that they've put out. It's the most polished, the most diverse piece of art that they've done, as well as the most inspiring. But my personal favorite is, and always has been, I Empire. So for the songs, I also chose Call to Arms and Rite of Spring, which I feel like are 2 songs that get glanced over so much. Call to Arms is just such an uplifting and edgy, just kind of get going introduction to the album, which is like, holy shit, like just exploded out of nowhere. And then Rite of Spring, that song has just such a deep emotional resonance with me, with the words of the song where Tom is basically just letting out everything that he's been through in his life and how he wouldn't change a thing because he wouldn't be the man he is today without it. And kind of just closing that chapter of Blink and everything that he's been through in his life and saying hello and opening the door to Angels and Airwaves moving forward. Then it goes right into Heaven, which is just such an uplifting and emotional way to end that album, which is pretty much why I love I Empire so much. And then another song which I feel like isn't really getting as much credit as it should is Tunnels. That by far is one of my favorite Angels and Airwaves songs, just because it's such an uplifting and deep emotional and dark, but also inspiring all at the same time. And I feel like that above all is what Angels and Airwaves represents, at least for me. And, you know, Tom has such an emotional connection to that song. I feel like it should get a lot more credit than it does.
Hey guys, my name is Sean and I am from Phoenix, Arizona in the United States. And I am 28 years old and I have been a Blink-182 fan since I was about 12 years old. I got into Angels and Airwaves probably about the I Empire album is when I really kind of started to take a listen to them. To answer your guys' question as far as what is their best album or what are some of their top songs, I think it's kind of hard to choose songs, obviously. But with albums, I will say I think my personal favorite is Love. I think what's unique about Angels and Airwaves is that each album kind of builds off one another. With We Don't Need to Whisper, you know, you kind of saw Tom take some steps that he was afraid to necessarily take with Blink-182, and you really kind of saw that musical sense that he had come out. And then with I Empire, you kind of saw that start to emerge even a little more here and there. And I think Love is peak Tom DeLonge, and I think Love is everything that he wanted in an album, everything that he had envisioned, and I think you see the true potential that he had in that album. As far as songs go, you know, obviously The Adventure, very powerful song, very moving song. I think anybody likes that song. I think some underrated songs from, you know, I Empire would be Love Like Rockets. That song is very musically in depth as far as Tom using his voice and instruments as well. Saturday Love is a great song. I absolutely love that song. And We Don't Need to Whisper, The Gift is a very, very good song. So anyways, just wanted to say that. Appreciate your guys' time. We'll talk to you later.
Hey, my name's Andrew. My favorite record is probably We Don't Need to Whisper by Angels and Airwaves. The album holds a special place to me because I really discovered the band through the leaked demo of The Adventure. My cousin had a copy and we played it on these really crappy speakers on a portable DVD player where he had it burned to a CD. Fell in love with it. Pre-ordered the album when it came out and got the autographed booklet from the band and these little wings that I still wear on my hat almost every day. Anywho, when the album came out, it wasn't quite what I expected. And I'll be the first to admit that I actually wasn't a big fan on my first listen. It was kind of jarring because I was expecting everything to sound like The Adventure, which is, youthful arrogance. But as I really dug deeper into the album and really listened to the songs and what they meant, it really just resonated through and through and grew on me, as a lot of the best music does. The record itself didn't come out until shortly after I graduated high school, which was a turbulent time for a lot of reasons. And that album helped me get through those hard times. And I am grateful for it. So, what can I say? Angels and Airwaves, favorite record, We Don't Need to Whisper. Personal favorite track, ironically, It Hurts, not The Adventure. Again, that's what happens when you listen to the whole thing and you discover it all on your own.
So special thank you to all the people who called in for this episode. Great to hear a multitude of opinions on, favorite song, favorite album, and just the general legacy of the band. And special thanks to all you guys for participating in the poll. Again, we almost got 2,500 people participating in this poll, which is a huge turnout for us. So I really, really love how involved the community is. Hopefully you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to leave a comment on a Facebook page or Facebook group, on any of the social media threads, on Instagram, Twitter, wherever, letting us know what you thought of this episode of the podcast. And if you didn't get to call in via the voicemail, just go ahead and leave us your thoughts about what your favorite songs were, what your favorite album was from the poll. In the meantime, my name is Adam.
My name's Steven.
And from the Canadian Rocky Mountains, J. Corey Fox.
And we'll see you next time.